finish every day and be done with it. For manners and for wise living, it is a vice to remember. You have done what you could. Some blunders and absurdities no doubt crept in. Forget them as soon as you can. Tomorrow is a new day. You shall begin it well and serenely, and with too high a spirit to be cumbered with your old nonsense. This day for all that is good and fair. It is too dear with its hopes and invitations to waste a moment on the rotten yesterdays. That's from Ralph Waldo Emerson. Anthony Trollope says this: a small daily task, if it be really daily, will beat the labors of a spasmodic Hercules. I'm Chad Brooks, and welcome to this episode of Productive Pastor, The Day. What's up, friends? It's Chad here. Haven't we been on a heck of a journey these last few months? I sure cannot believe we are wrapping up this season. We've talked about personal awareness, rhythms, preaching, relationships, and then we ran down the entire length of time it takes for us to develop personal approaches to productivity that are both effective and healthy. I think I've dropped in every single thing I've learned these last few years in these episodes. And today is the same thing. Last lap, last episode of the season, but it's just as big of a deal. And all I will tell you is this: everything in life is essentially planning until we get to this moment. And all of this whole season, and this episode is a result of the last few years where I've been working on a journey from being a workaholic to someone who's more mindful of my health and how my vocational life is affected. And I'm not here as a productivity expert, but just another pastor alongside of you in the journey. So let's just get into it. Last episode. Now, one thing I need to let you know. Tons of you, and I mean tons of you, bought the Season 1 workbook this past weekend during the Memorial Day sale. And all I will say is this: if you want to grab this resource at the Season 1 price of $30, you need to do it in the next few days, because a week after this episode's release, it's going to go up to the permanent price of $50. Now, it is slammed full of action-focused work that you can do that goes alongside of each episode, but that price is only going to be there for another week. Also, remember to come join and hang out with us, the Productive Pastor community on Facebook. It's the Productivity Party. That's what I was stumbling over. New people, it's awesome. It's fun. We get a lot done there. But today, we're going to talk about the big ways your day makes a difference. We're going to talk about a few strategies to think about, and we're also going to talk about making a shift towards how making a shift towards intentionality changes things. And we're going to do that really with three movements to think about today, because this is what I'm assuming right now. I'm assuming you've listened to the whole Season 1. And if this is your first time to hang out with us, that's awesome. How about you do this, though? Listen to this episode. You're going to get a little bit of an idea of what we've spent the last 11 episodes talking about. It's almost 4.5 hours of content. But then go back to the beginning, because this is really just we're hitting a capstone of the whole 9 yards today. But the first thing is this: the starting well. Now, we talked about this a little bit last episode in the week, but starting your day well. Now, caveat, we're going to come back to this in the second point. Hopefully you're not in a place to where you're showing up on the morning and every day and asking, I wonder what I need to do today. But that's really not even the beginning of this, because this is the question I want to ask you. When do you work the best? Now, every single one of us is going to say, we're going to have times. We're going to say, I'm a morning person, or I'm great in the afternoon. If you're great in the afternoon, I want to know what you're eating for lunch, because I'm horrible in the afternoon. Or you might be a night owl, or you might have just moved through those. I've been all of those people at some point in time in my day, but right now I'm a morning person. But you ask yourself that question: when do I work the best? And understanding that time and space and understanding what you do during those moments, it matters tremendously. But there's also this thing about, the first few things that we do each day, they really set the tone for the rest of the day. I think Jocko Willink has said often, you make your bed first thing so you've already accomplished something. Well, I don't really make my bed that often. I should not leave that for my wife to do so much, but I still think there's something about the first few things that you do. Now, I wrote a blog post a couple of episodes back. It's called One Behavior Theory. And I'll line out in that blog post the difference between a good day in my life and a bad day in my life. And I'm going to kind of just read through a couple of things that are in an image I made for that. So, a positive day, I wake up early, I spend time in scripture, I have time to read, I might journal a bit, then I get cleaned up, I get ready for the day, and then I have an hour or so to write or to work on just focus projects that matter the most. And then I start my workday off with my known tasks. I stick to my schedule. I eat a healthy lunch. I'm making air quotes right now. I moderate with the caffeine levels I drink, but then also at the end of the day, I'm realizing I've accomplished the priorities I have. I take good notes for future things. And I'm not living in the bottom of my strengths. I know the bottom of my strengths, I'm talking about Clifton Strength Finders here. If I'm in the basement, I've named basement Chad Hank. So I've stayed away from Hank that day, and I stick to my day blocks. Whereas if I have a negative day, a day that is just a struggle bus all day long, I'm going to kind of wake up a little bit late. And then when I wake up, I'm going to watch YouTube and I'm going to drink my coffee. I'm going to rush to the office, so don't spend time in scripture and prayer and reflection. I get cleaned up really quickly, and I rush into the office without thinking strategically. I rely on caffeine. I eat a trash lunch. I allow myself to get distracted all the time. I don't even look at my schedule or my priorities or my time blocks. I'm going to act like Hank all day long. I'll jump from task to task as my mind wanders. And then I'll get home at some point in time with nothing that really actually needed to get done. Now, one behavior theory, this is my idea that there is one thing that we do, or maybe a couple of things that we can do first thing in the morning that really set the tone for the rest of the day. Now, for me, and this is going to sound a little bit like a duh, Chad, you're a preacher, but I'm going to talk about more than that. For me, it's hitting that time in scripture and reflection first, because number one, I do believe that the presence of God is the most clarifying thing that we have in our life. And so I'm not going to not knock any supernatural things that are going on there. But what I'm also going to say is they cause my mind to start working in the way that my mind is wired. And if I'm spending time in scripture, if I'm journaling, which means I'm just kind of starting to create things in my head and to focus on things, I spend time working on some things that are just an absolute priority early on. This is all before 7:30 in the morning. And so it's there. So I think that, first of all, this one behavior theory, I think that there's something that's going on here. Now, there's a morning routine, and I believe deeply in the morning routine. And this is the question I'm going to ask you. Does your morning steal your focus, or does your morning enhance your focus? Now, a couple of things to go on to talk about this. Number one, I do hear from people often. They say, Chad, you don't have kids in the house. There's some luxuries you have that I don't have. And you know what I'm going to tell you? You're exactly right. I do. But I've been trying to research to figure out this because I want to know and understand this. Because what I'm finding out now is I'm actually a little bit older than the average person in Productive Pastor right now. And so little kids around the house are a thing. My niece stayed the night last night. She's 10. I kind of got a little bit of a vibe of what it's like to have a 10-year-old in the house. So there's a fantastic book that I just started reading. I found it. I got recommendations from it. I decided to go into it and start reading about it, but it's called Habits of the Household. And it's a book about discipleship. It's about practicing the story of God in everyday rhythms. It's by Justin Early and Troy and Ruth Simons. I'm going to put a link to that in the show notes at revchadbrooks.com/PPP/011. You can grab it on Kindle for like $7. It's free on Audible. I just jumped into starting to read this to kind of understand some of this. And it's a relatively new book. It came out mid-pandemic. And so it's there. So there's some good helps there. There's also this article that I found, and it's dated. It's a few years old, and it's interesting because of a couple of things. It's about a morning rhythm and routine. And I'm going to tell you right now, I think what this person says is a tremendous luxury and is a little bit out of reach. But what's so interesting about it is the way it's called Time and Serenity from a Daily Routine. It's on Medium. It's by Jerry Brito. But he talks about your morning routine as an algorithm. Now, we talk about the algorithm a lot, how the algorithm can predict, the algorithm can drive. I mean, if you've ever been talking about something with a friend and all of a sudden an ad shows up in front of you, like we know the algorithm is a real thing. But he talks about his morning routine and compares it to an algorithm, this idea of predictability that might be happening there. So, to win the day, think about how do you start the day. So that's the first thing. The second thing is asking yourself that question: what am I doing today? I kind of hinted at this earlier, but if you've listened to this season, you should really be hitting the day with a rhythm already. You should have action pieces that are part of your larger plan. You should know, hey, this is the day that I'm going to kind of try to knock this out. In the workbook, one of the things I talk about is developing different categories of your days, of having different days of the week, and there's some fantastic exercises in the workbook to help you figure those things out. But you should be able to step into the day if you've got with a handful of things like, I know I need to do these things. But as we begin to filter that stuff down, I really think this is a question to ask. And this is a fantastic filter that I have had to start using over the last 6 months. But where does your church need you at your best right now? Because that's going to change, but it will help you determine what might be going on. And we've talked in a lot of previous episodes about the power of scheduling for 80%. This might mean having a couple of hours that are always super flexible in your schedule, maybe having an entire day. Ministry is tough because our work is either typically extremely predictable or just totally unpredictable. And we have to learn kind of what those filters look like. So what am I doing today? Now, like I said, hopefully you're popping into this day already with a couple of action items that are important with the priorities that you've set. I also think it's huge to stick to a top 3 of tasks to talk about, write it on a Sharpie, on a Post-it note. And if you can't get if you can't fit it on there, you're probably trying to do that much today. Episode 2 about a time audit. I'm giving away a free day sheet as part of that. That day sheet's a fantastic tool to help you filter and to sort. Like I said, these things will change, but it helps you determine what you need to be doing. I started reading Greg McCowan's book, Essentialism, for the first time ever a few days ago. I got tired of hearing quotes about it and quotes from it and decided to jump into it. I've had an old airport copy laying around for a few years. But one of the things I learned from him is this, that being unfocused means being exhausted. But being focused means being fulfilled. You might be hearing this, or a lot of times I'll get requests from people to talk, and they'll say, Chad, my days are just complete chaos. I don't know what's going on. And the fix is not by taking care of the day. The fix is by understanding what focus means, what fulfillment, what clarity, what vision, what strategic design of priorities, and those sorts of things happen. Because that's the thing, all of that working together, like it will fill your day for you. Like if you reach out with that question from me, we're not going to talk about your day. We're going to talk about your month and your quarters and your years and your priorities. But McCowan also talks about how it is an emotional discipline to say no to things. If you've done the big work, the planning work, all the work we've been talking about for the last few episodes, the day is really all about just sticking to the discipline of what your plan is and you learning what is it like to be disciplined, because everyone is going to be disciplined in a different way. Everybody's going to react in a different way. All of those things. That's that second big chunk we're going to talk about today is what am I doing today? And the third thing and the last thing is this. What happens when things get cattywampus? Now, I don't even know if I can spell cattywampus correctly in the show notes, but what happens when things get cattywampus? I've learned a lot, and I saved this over a year ago as I was prepping up for this season, but I've become internet friends with Ev Chapman. She's a content creator and a writer. She's super active on Twitter. I'm going to have her linked. but she wrote an atomic essay on Twitter. And so it's this kind of short little 300-word essay of what she calls a minimum viable day. And she talks about like when her day just kind of turned into a train wreck of the things that she was able to do, even in spite of everything, to still move forward. Because in ministry, like I said, is either absolutely predictable or totally unpredictable. Like it's all going to get cattywampus at some point in time. And this is where our tiny, huge rhythms that we've built out, those small tasks that have huge consequences that we've realized, just the other rhythms that we have built up in general. Her whole idea of a minimum viable day, I think, is an incredibly interesting thing for a person in ministry to look at, because we know what it's like when everything just goes wild, but we're in ministry and things are going to go wild. And I don't know about you, but, over the last few, times where my schedule has just gone haywire in ministry, after the last few years of pandemic pastoring, I was actually thankful that I got to be a pastor again. And so we just learn that we build up these rhythms and systems to take care of these things. When we reduce complicated things to small, consistent steps forward, you will be blown away how little work it actually is. And it gives you the mind space for pastoral care, for study, for prayer, for reflection, those sorts of things. I love Cal Newport's idea of deep work. Like I said earlier, everyone's going to have the time of the day where they work the best. When you find out what those times are, you need to learn to defend. And then unless something is an absolute dire emergency, you can come to it when you come out of that time of deep work. I try to get 3 of those in a week, and that's it. 3 of those in a week. That lets me get a lot of deep things accomplished. But there's also, sometimes you need to learn just to call it like it is. And I'm going to end up writing on this more because it's too much time for us to talk about it on the podcast. It might make it into an interlude episode over the next couple of months. But there's something about having a to-do list that is appropriate for what your mental state is, for what your emotional state is. And like I said, there's going to be a whole thing about that in the future. But you get to call it like it is. Like if it's just gone cattywampus, sometimes you might need to say it's gone cattywampus and just go home, take a breather, go for a walk, go sit in the sanctuary, something like that. You've got the ability to just call things like it is. And so that's it. So when I think about how to close up this season of the podcast, there's a quote from Mary Oliver that I want to tell you. And that really just kind of seals this whole first season reboot back up well. But Mary Oliver, the poet, writes this: "Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?" So that's it. Season 1 of the podcast is over. There's a lot of just kind of cool things coming down the line. I'm planning on some conversations about pandemic pastoring. I've gotten some requests from folks to talk more about preaching and what does that mean. So I might have something up my sleeve as far as that is concerned. Because like I said, y'all, the podcast is back. We're here, but the next season can go a few different ways. But you can rest easy. You will hear me back on the feed in not too terribly long. But until then, do me a favor. Come and hang out at the Productive Pastor community on Facebook. Whenever we're not podcasting, I'm live streaming over there a good bit. You can get a lot of good tactical stuff out of that. But thanks so much for downloading. Y'all, this season has gone over so super well. It's crazy. I love it. I'm excited to just kind of hear from you and hang out with you again. And so thank you so much. And I will see you back next time.